Welcome to the Strong Family Project podcast. You are in for a treat today. Mel and I both have a full sheet of notes on the topic of worry and stress, how to manage it, how to work through it when you're working with your family. Mel, read us in and we'll get started.
Welcome back to the Strong Family Project podcast, where we guide you on the path to raising confident, independent, and resilient children in a strong family environment.
I have been reading the comments and the reviews. Thank you so much for the reviews, specifically on Apple Podcasts. There's been a lot of them going up there. Thank you very much. The rule of the show is when you hear something that helps you improve your family life, press pause, write it down. Handwriting is valuable for you, and then drop us a review over on your podcast platform. It really helps us out a lot. And if you can find someone that you can share the podcast with that you think will help them out, please do pass it on. That's how we're growing here at the beginning. And I think I handled that intro fairly well while you shook the microphones aggressively. I was trying to focus.
The second time I did it, I thought, I don't think he's enjoying that.
No, I did not.
Sorry.
So something new on this episode came from a YouTube comment, because we've been putting all the videos up on YouTube as well, along with some bonus shorts, and the bonus kids episodes have been landing on our YouTube channel. And the comment said, hey, not everyone knows you yet, and you're already, 13, 14, 15 episodes in. We haven't done much of an introduction, and that has been intentional. I wanted the content to stand on its own and for you to get value out of it, not for your perceived value of our background and be like, oh, you have to trust us because we said X, Y, and Z, or we've done X, Y, and Z in the past. We want to get right to the content. We are going to take 90 seconds each and explain a little bit more about our background as we get into this big episode on worry and stress management. I will go first. My full name, Joseph David Hashey. I graduated from Colgate University, undergrad in political science, where I specialized my senior year in constitutional law. Decided not to go to law school. It wasn't of interest to me. After studying politics, I decided that's not a path I wanted to go in. I went back and earned my master's in education. I taught high school economics, U.S. history for about 8 years. Won some awards for teaching, specifically for getting kids involved and trying to get them to understand the political environment in an easily digestible way. Did get a chance to go to Washington, D.C., speak to people on the topic, and there are interactions from those trips that I'll be able to share with you on the podcast because there's some important lessons learned I learned from those trips. I started my own company in my basement. I lost my father very young, as you can feel the passion project getting started on why we're doing this. He didn't really take care of himself, and he passed in his early 50s from a lot of preventable heart disease and things like that. So sleep apnea, obesity, blood pressure issues, all the works. So I started a company in my basement to help people get fit. And I started traveling the country to any gym that would open their doors to me so I could learn from them, their style, and their management of running a company. And grew the company out of my basement to multiple facilities, have an amazing leadership staff, and I still do strategic planning for that company. We've been open for 16 years now. Throughout that process, I want to learn more about business. So I study more and traveling the country to different places, hotels, restaurants, gyms again, to learn more about the structure of companies and how they run. I felt I had a deficiency in that area, so I applied and was accepted to the national cohort for the Goldman Sachs Small Business Program, kind of an executive MBA style program where I studied business. Fast forward another few years, I do business consulting out of an amazing group called SBF, where I get to work with a lot of business leaders on how they integrate their plans into their team culture. And that's where I get a lot of the ideas for how we run our family, or what I see out there in a way to run a staff and how to treat people and how to motivate people and how to manage the stress of business and everything that comes along with it. Along with that, still on the strategic leadership team on the fitness company. I do the business consulting. I work with a great group of people at BGL in their coaching department and manage our investment portfolio of short-term rentals currently, which we'll have an episode on financial management of how the heck we landed with short-term rental properties, long-term rental properties, how we create financial stability for our family. And I tell you all this to give you the summary. I'm very thankful for my background in education, but what's not being told on it is that my father was very blue collar, so I got to, I think, learn the best of both worlds. We'd be fixing people's cars on the weekends, and I'd be I had fixing people's cars, and I actually had a job painting garbage cans, painting dumpsters, and I loved the job. Met a lot of great people at that job, all the way up to speaking at universities. So from dumpster painting to university speaker to author to co-authoring a best-selling fitness book. There's a lot in there that I want to pour into this podcast. And so that's my brief background, not going into depth in any of it. I missed a bunch, but there's a lot in there and a lot of shared experiences. And the last part of it is Mel and I decided to step away from a lot of things, fly across the country 2 years ago and invest fully in our family and our 3 sons. And it landed us on the side of a mountain in Colorado. And that is a story for another podcast. Mel, what's your background?
Okay. That's a tough act to follow. So I received my bachelor's in psychology from Binghamton University. And while I was a student there, I also mentored a young girl who was in an abusive home situation. And then I went on to get my master's in social work from New York University. And while there, I interned and helped families as a caseworker, trying to connect them to any kind of needs they had, what kind of services they might need. And then I also interned with a substance abuse treatment facility. So those were really interesting experiences just outside of my little bubble that I grew up in. And then after graduating, we got married and each started our first jobs. Mine was as a counselor working with children who are victims of sexual abuse and also their siblings and families. I worked there for 5 years. And I really credit a lot of my background in social work with how I parent now. So that's been a really big piece of who I've become. But after having my second son, Henry, I decided to stay home full time. And I stayed home with my 2 young ones, and then Joe had started his fitness business, and I ended up stepping up and doing the book work. So that kind of, I was home with the kids, but also was supporting him in his endeavor. And that's grown. I do a lot with that now in the background of the fitness, but now, fast forward to where we are today, I try to do a lot with the schools. So I volunteer in Henry's class once a week, helping with math, which I really enjoy, and my son's preschool class, and whatever kind of committees I can join. There was a strategic visioning task force recently for the district, so I'm participating in that. So I really try to focus my time on family, whether it's the kids with what's going on at school. This podcast has become a big piece of what we're doing together now. And that's a quick background on my history.
Where that gets us today is we both feel that it's just plain wrong that there's such high expectations of parents and such low education available for parents. So there's a lot of people who want to do good for their families, but they don't have clarity and strategic planning. And so we want to provide that. And wherever this ends up leading us, we'd love to do some in-person workshops. We'll have a book coming out in about 6 months. This process is a big passion project for us, and we want to give as much of us to you as possible. With that in mind, we're getting into today's topic. Let's get rolling on worry and stress. And the reason why I find this topic important for families is that when you live in a cloud of worry and stress, you can't do the things you really envision yourself doing as a parent. You can't pour your energy into the kids. You can't pour your energy into yourself to recharge. And with this just weight of worry and stress, it really limits what you can accomplish. And we want to help you through that today with a little bit of a plan. I have 4 steps. Mel has a page of notes. Mel, why do you think this is an important topic?
I think you hit the nail on the head by saying if you spend a lot of your energy worrying, you won't have energy to raise your children the way you might want to the best of your ability. So I think it's all about focus. If you're focused on things going on in the outside world or on political issues, which I'm not saying those are wrong things to think about or consider, but the time spent on them will take your energy away from the time you can spend on building your family. I think that's really what it's about.
I think the best place to start is back at episode 1 with establishing your core values. If you don't know what you stand for, you start worrying about everything that comes your way. If you picture a tall piece of grass in the wind, it gets blown all over the place by every wind. What you want to do is establish yourself like an oak tree. Yeah, it moves a little bit with the wind, but it is rooted in its values. It's rooted, and it's not going to just get blown over so easily. And so people who go from so stressed out about this topic of the day to so stressed about this thing that happened at work, is that they haven't spent the time to establish their values, and that if those are protected and safe, it alleviates a lot of the stress. And it begs the question is like, why am I worrying about this? And so that's a good place to start.
And we really believe that the family is the most important unit of society. So if families are strong, if you make those strong roots, then as a community we will be stronger as well. And this really came to light for us recently with our 7th grader starting middle school this year. So we really started thinking about this because he went there and he suddenly is exposed to lots of new ideas and different kinds of kids and people, and much more outspoken than in elementary school. But he seems really stable, like that oak tree. And I think that's really credited partially to just his personality, but also to the fact that we have really tried to foster this deep core values in our home. So he has a filter instead of just being carried away by any which thing that comes up.
I agree, having those rooted in a core value set. So that is the good place to start, is to make sure you establish what you value and your family's principles, so you know whether you should care or not. It's that same question I asked in the relationship episode, like, why do I care? And you have to ask yourself that question. Is it because it's important to you, or other people say it should be important to you?
Right, and I think if kids go out into the world, and adults too, they might not know, they might be carried away by anything that they see if they don't know what is important and what they should be focusing on. Because kids will be influenced. Little ones are super impressionable. Adults can be influenced by what they see when they're out there. So that's going to happen. You can't ignore the fact that there will be influence and there will be things being said that are going to impact you throughout the day. But how you filter it and how you choose to focus your energy is really based on whether you have values set or not.
I want to explain what I think is a core concept for life, and I don't remember if I've said it in another episode, but I'm going to say it here again, and that is opportunity costs. It is something I learned when I was studying and teaching economics, and it applies so much to people's everyday life, and many times they don't realize it. And it is the difference between being a surface level decision maker or understanding things at a deeper level and making these decisions like, should I care, really care? And so here's what opportunity costs are. When you choose to do something, it costs you the opportunity to do something else. It would blow your mind how simple that concept is and how few people actually apply it to any of their decision making. So when you see a news story that seems so tasty to get involved in, and you just want to talk about it with everyone during the day, that costs you the opportunity to have real conversations and plan your family and do your core values. You've wasted a day just talking about whatever that news story was. And there's a tough component to it where people think that's unkind to care about things that are actually important to them and not care about these things that are in the news. Well, I'll tell you what, it's just not true. Because when you just care about these things in the news and talk about them all day, you didn't move that news story forward at all. You just had this sense of caring as like that was your duty, but you weren't able to measure the opportunity cost, and it cost you a day of your life, and it cost you the real conversation you should be having. It cost you your stress level and energy when you text someone like, oh, I can't believe this happened in a different country. Well, how about you look at what's happening in your own house first? And that's a difficult conversation to stomach, because then some people will feel uncaring, like, well, I should care about this because I'm a global citizen or whatever. Yes, you can. You can care, but the answer is going to be the same, which is you have influence over your family, make that right first, and then the world will start to become a better place. Versus, posting a picture like, hey, I really care about this thing, and like that's it. And so I really want people to understand opportunity costs. If you get nothing out of this podcast, understand every decision you make costs you the opportunity to do something else. You've weighed it out and you've made your choice. Make these choices with intent and purpose, and just don't go with the flow, because that might not be where you want to go. And you're going to end up somewhere far away from your family's core values, and you'll end up full of stress and worry because you'll be worried about problems that you can't control.
Well, that's the benefit of having values. If a topic comes up or a story on the news or some kind of gossip at work, you can literally ask yourself, does this story or this topic or issue that I am now aware of, does it coincide with my values, and should I give it my time and energy? And the other thing that came up for me is we talk a lot about controlling the controllables. Do you have the ability to make a difference in that topic? And if you don't, is it worth giving it your energy? So it's just like Joe said, being intentional, being purposeful with what you're doing with your time.
So I have a power question with you. You might want to write down. Is this the real problem? Is this the real thing that I should be worrying about, or is this the real problem? Either way you want to word it. If you're feeling worry and stress, you need to write down what you think the problem is. And then, is this really what I should be focusing my energy on? Is this the real thing that I need to solve or can solve, have the power to solve, have the ability and skill set to solve, which is a whole nother conversation. You can learn the skills to solve some of these big problems. They're learned through solving the small problems first and not just saying you're trying to solve the problems.
Yeah. I think, that was a really good power question. And I think what it really does is, I think a lot of our episodes are focusing on becoming intentional, becoming purposeful, and not just doing it because you think you should, or that's how you were raised, or that's what you're most comfortable with or used to. So becoming more intentional, and specifically about families. We want our kids to be intentional. We want them to make good decisions. So they need to watch us make good decisions. We oftentimes will ask them, you're worried about this thing. Let's just take, for example, our son has a soccer game later. What can you control? Can you control the other team? Can you control what size they're going to be or how much experience they've had? You can't control that. So let's focus on not worrying about the things you cannot control. Instead, consider what you can control. Your practice, building up your team, enjoying the time with your friends. So I think really showing the kids what they can control, but we have to also role model that.
I become endlessly frustrated with decisions that are made in the public sector from studying political science that I shared with you earlier, because they're often the surface level solutions that sell people on an idea so they get more votes and they can stay in office and say that they tried to solve something. But it's like putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches, and they just put endless Band-Aids on them, but you're never going to actually solve it. And I'll give an example for you. Here in Colorado, there was a ballot proposal to provide free lunches for students. Is that what it was, Mel?
Yep.
And so it was like a yes or no, for or against, do you believe that students should have free lunches? And they had very good reasons why to solve hunger, and maybe they don't have the right food at home, etc. Okay, like I can buy in on that, but I don't believe the solution is a free lunch program. So I voted against it. Now someone might see that, oh, Joe wants kids to starve. Well, that is so surface level and rudimentary way of arguing that it is endlessly frustrating, because here's why. If they took that money that they did to just provide these free lunches and instead hired a teacher and provided the food where the kids could learn how to cook the lunches and then have it at the end and have it as a elective in the school program, it would have been cheaper to hire another educator, provide these kids with a skill, and provide them with the lunch. However, that's too deep problem solving, and it's tougher sell that way. So all is, hey, well, let's give them a free lunch. And so, yes, I was against giving the kids a school-provided free lunch, but I was for getting them a free lunch and a skill set at a cheaper price. But that is, too complicated to explain in the public sector. So just keep that in mind when you're seeing these arguments out there, like, oh, well, for or against a topic. Well, shoot, it's a lot deeper than that. And if you're just a black and white for and against person, you're missing the opportunity cost, because just providing the lunches for free costs the schools the opportunity to hire, provide a job, and provide skills to the kids.
Yeah, that's a great example. We had a discussion about it before that happened, because it was confusing to us. Why should my kid get a free lunch if I provide it for them? It's kind of confusing. So there's usually better solutions than just those surface ones. Can I shift a little bit? Or were you going to flow into something? No,
you may. And here's where I want to go with this. Okay. I want to start this high level, understand these strategies like opportunity costs, like the question, is this a real problem? Trying to bring it back to the home where you have the most influence to solve things. And then we'll bring it we're going to shrink it right down to the day-to-day stresses that we all feel. So I don't want you to check out and thinking like, oh, they're just talking big picture. Like, we're getting there. You need to understand the big picture to be effective in the small picture.
So another concept that we use with our kids is protecting your mind. So as if you have this wall of protection around your brain, What are you going to let in? And this can be as simple as what you're watching on TV, what kind of music you're listening to, who you're around and who you're talking to. And recently I decided to give up social media for Lent. I talked about that in a previous podcast, and it's really been life-changing. I even went through and unfollowed a bunch of stuff, and because I could see that I was better off without it. I was better off focusing my energy on my kids than looking at stuff, and I'd always end up worrying. So to bring it back to worry, I was allowing ideas in my head that were just taking me away from what I really wanted to do. So we tried to translate that to the kids. If they go to school, we say, don't forget, you need to protect your mind, protect that wall around your brain. So if there's a conversation happening over here and you think it's going to make you worry or just take you to a negative place, you need to walk away from it. So just that awareness that you have the control about what you allow in and what you don't. I think that's an important concept and this is, we talk about constant gentle pressure. So we try to bring this up. I try to bring it up in the morning. You're going to go to school today, and just remember, just keep that wall around your mind, make it stronger, and only let in things that you think are worth your while and that are going to make you stronger.
Yeah, keep going. I'm writing some notes.
Okay. So I guess this kind of connects with this. It's very easy in our world today to worry about a lot more than maybe we worried about before. I think ever since COVID, there's just been more worry out there, and people have almost attached their identities to worry sometimes. And again, this brings me back to what isn't within your control. It's easy to kind of spin out of control with all these worries and then to kind of give them to the kids. But when we come into our home, we want it to be within our control. We want to be able to spend time together, enjoy each other, share, and feel safe. So worry just doesn't seem to move any of that forward.
Yeah, I'm going to credit Jim Rohn on it, even though I'm not sure if it was him or another person. No one's looked up my quotes yet and called me out, but worrying is interest. Worrying is interest you pay on a problem. And so you have your problem, and the problem's still going to exist whether you worry about it or not.
My grandmother, we always called her a worrier. She worried about everything. And she was a happy, fun person, but that worry just always sat there. And I think towards the end of her life, sometimes it cost her time with other people, some friendships, because she was always concerned and worried. And it usually wasn't about things she could control. So I kind of think back on that and say, I don't want that to be the story that I tell myself. I don't want to be someone who sits and worries. And I do sometimes, of course, worry. But then I think through practice every day of problem solving and trying to figure it out, we've become much more focused on what we can control and what we can do, and not what we should just think about and worry about.
I'll give you another question. I love to ask questions that help out the listeners. And that is, what is this worrying doing for me? And if you want to get more specific, is this worrying helping me? Is this worrying helping my family? And sometimes putting things to words help you realize, because you just get in a cycle. It is so tempting, and we see so many people, myself included, who just go down a rabbit hole of worry for hours, and it's like, I just killed those hours. Like, those hours are gone, and I didn't move it forward. Did that serve me and my family? No. Okay, then I need to keep working on the habit of asking myself that question so I can get to a solution-oriented mindset.
And isn't it true that most worries never even come true? People waste a lot of time on it, and then it just doesn't even happen. So we have to have a little bit of hindsight. But one of the reasons we actually ended up doing this worry topic was someone brought up to us yesterday that someone in their family has a newborn, a couple months old, and they're constantly concerned about saying the wrong thing to their kid, or they're going to say something and it's going to affect that child for the rest of their life. And I appreciate someone being cautious, because you don't want to just say anything that's on your mind. You want to be purposeful with how you speak to your child. But it made me think about, there have been times when I've said something to my child, or that I've overreacted, and then I walk away and I regret it. And I think a concept I want to put out there is, you can make it better. So I go back to my son and I might say, I really didn't feel good about saying this to you. I want to apologize. So there's something about, if you're worried about something you said, you can ask yourself, can I make this better? Can I go back and do something differently about it. And if you're living with that person, I think it's good to go and do that and kind of clear the air. So just be empowered to know that you can go make it better instead of stewing about it.
I know I get the reputation of always being the harsher one. I completely agree with this. You have to give yourself some grace, and you learn to even respect people more when they admit, like, hey, you know, I might have screwed up that situation. Let's work on that and make it right, versus being someone who just seems like they always get it right all the time. And I think that used to be the parenting model. Like, hey, just trust me, I'm the parent. We make some mistakes, and you get, instead of worrying about like, hey, I'm going to make some mistakes, so I'm not going to do anything. Like, you got to go. And then when you make mistakes, all right, let's correct them and keep going. Otherwise, you just never get off the launch pad.
And I don't want my kids to think that someday they will wake up and be an adult and not make a mistake again. Like, it doesn't work that way. So part of our parenting model has always been for the kids to see that we are not perfect. We are works in progress, which is part of why one of our values is personal development. We don't have it all figured out. And we certainly want them to see us as projects in progress.
I want to squish a pop culture thing while I did my good cop thing. Like, hey, you got to give yourself grace. That is true. There seems to be a pop culture thing, like worrying is part of social currency. It gives you something to talk about. Like, oh, I'm so worried this will happen. I'm so worried about that. Like, you need to check your friend group when they do things like that and say, hey, like, okay, you can be worried about that. What's your plan? What are you going to do about it? And if they have none, they're just looking for something to talk about, and that's usually not the path you want to go down. Usually if you help correct that path, you'll help them move forward. It's not something negative. You're not calling them out. This isn't a big thing, big change in their life. It's just changing the culture around, let's always talk about things and let's start being about things. And you have a lot of power about that in your own family, but also in your close friend group of influence. And so don't take that for granted.
Well, this makes me, I want to bring up how important then the whole path that we started this podcast with is. So if you're maybe in the situation where you're worried your family is not as strong as you want it to be, or there's been a lot of worry lately, or you just feel like there's something missing, the 7 steps of our path really push you forward and give you actionable steps that you can actually do. I spoke on a podcast this week, and the person I was speaking with...
Famous.
No. It was really, really
famous. Keep going.
Great conversation.
Yeah. Okay, good. I don't want you to talk down about you.
No, not talking down. But it was his 1-year-old's birthday, and he works 12 hours a day, and him and his wife have been struggling lately. Like, how are we going to balance this out? And I could tell that it was something that they'd been talking about, and suddenly I presented this path to him, and he's like, this might really work, because they just needed someone to give them some actionable steps, some control in the situation where worry... You could go to bed worried every night. Did I not spend enough time with my wife or husband? Did I not do enough for my kid this day? Instead, we're giving you actionable steps, and I think that's exciting.
Agreed, and agreed that you're famous.
It was fun, and I should just... I'm not good about patting myself on the back at all.
Right.
And this is very new for me. And when Joe first told me, hey, you're going to be on this podcast, I was like, no, that's your department. So stepped out of the comfort zone, and it was very worthwhile. And it was cool to see someone potentially impacted by what we're doing, which is kind of the point.
All right, here we go. I want to get to the framework.
Do it.
Are you good?
I'm good.
Okay. So there's 2 types of worries that we've talked about. One that you want to solve and one that you just want to talk about it. So that first step is to know yourself and decide which one you're dealing with. Is this something I'm just looking for a gossip type worry, or something that is important enough for me to solve? And the filter you use is your core values. If you know yourself and your family, your core values are things you protect. Those are things like, all right, there's something that is affecting those, whether it's a kids at school thing, whether it's inputs you're allowing into your life, like social media about thing that Mel mentioned. Then you can address them and move forward. The thing with worry is that if you have a plan, that worry tends to dissipate. If you want to keep it and just talk about it, you're going to be carrying it for a long time. So it can cause a lot of stress in your life. So I want you to know yourself and move forward. Second part is to identify the problem. Ask yourself, is this the real problem that I'm trying to solve? A lot of times what we think is the problem is not the problem. When I do business consulting, we talk a lot about problem solving as just a surface level step. What the higher level task is problem identification. So a lot of people have the talent to solve problems, but what if they're solving the wrong problem? And so there's a book by Chip and Dan Heath, I forget which one. They use the analogy of searchlight. Like you're just so focused, your searchlight is focused on one thing. Like take that bad boy and swing it side to side to make sure there's nothing else around it so you can see more before you try to make your action steps. So that's step 2. Step 3, make a decision. Step 4, execute on that decision over time. And the reason why I said 3 steps, and I really said 4, and I had 4 on the list, is because number 1, the know yourself, the core values should already be done, and that shouldn't change. I'm just going to reinforce that. So that's how critical your core values are. It solves these problems, step 1, for you already. It's created that momentum. It's got you off the ground. It's got you from 0 to 1. So that's why the core values are so important. You're already on the path once those are done. Once those are done, you identify the problem to make sure you're solving the right one. You make a decision and you execute. Well, how long? Over time.
And I just bring it back to the family piece. Obviously, those steps can be used for an individual, a family, a company, whatever. But at the end of the day, we're here to talk about families and strengthen families. And you could even bring that framework up with your children. Like write it down and just help them create that mindset. I think as I've been like writing up all these different pieces of the path, I keep thinking, sometimes as adults, things can be obvious to us, mindsets that we have or whatever, but we sometimes forget to sit down and kind of walk through it with the kids. So I think that would be really powerful for kids too, to be able to ask themselves, is this a worry that is helping me and helping me move forward, or is it something I can actually do something about? Those are good questions to start to instill in young minds.
Something that took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to learn is that there isn't usually right and wrong. Because that's the way we've always framed things, right and wrong. There is usually right, like a different version of right, slightly less right, but still right, like a medium. Like we just look for the right path to walk on, but instead like, hey, why don't we just start walking? And yeah, we might go a little bit this way and we'll get back on the path, we'll walk around a tree or whatever it is, but we'll get back to it. It's not like you're going to make a decision and then it immediately impacts your children forever, like we talked about with worry earlier. It's that, all right, this decision, it may or may not be the single best decision. I could sit here and think about it for another 2 days, or I could start executing on this plan now and make it the best decision through the execution phase. And that's why I say execute over time. Usually things take more than a day to fix. And it helps to understand that and put it into words, because we'll try to fix something in the moment. The heated moment, something goes wrong, we try to fix it, it goes even worse, and then we start worrying about it forever. It's like, okay, well, this didn't go great. I want to give myself 30, 60, 90 days. Those are typical time frames to work through this process, work out the worry, and then I can focus on something else. So let's go one step at a time. What's practical, and at what period of time does it take to become practical?
I love what you said about just pick something and start walking. This has been a personal struggle for me. I'll make these beautiful to-do lists. I'll type them up, I'll print them out, and then I'll just do nothing because it feels incredibly overwhelming. And I went to Joe one day and he's like, just start with something. Just do something, because as soon as you take a step forward, you create momentum to keep going. So what you were talking about made me think of that. Because that's really been a personal struggle for me. I just freeze because it's worry or because I'm overwhelmed instead of just doing something. It might not be the perfect answer, but like you said, there really isn't one. But just start moving, and then you'll likely be motivated to keep moving forward.
It's funny how this mindset has leaked over to all parts of our life. It's more so my life probably. When we go outside and you're like, oh, it's going to be cold. I'm like, I don't know, I'll just be a little bit more cold. Like I'm not going to go through and like search for a pair of gloves or something. I'm just going to accept it because I want to get moving. The momentum is what has become addictive to me, to where it's just like, all right, I just got to start going. Otherwise, I'm going to sit and worry. We had an incident the other night where we went out to dinner with my mom down at this nice little restaurant. I get out of the truck. I go into the restaurant. I'm seated at the restaurant. I press the lock button on my truck. I turn around. They're still in the truck. Like they had no momentum going. They were like talking about, I don't know, menus and like putting a coat on to go like 10 feet. As soon as the car's in park, my door's opening and I'm moving because I just don't want to sit anymore. And yeah, it's probably to an extreme, but that approach of like, hey, let's just get some momentum going. And then once you're moving, you can figure it out. It's a learned skill of kind of jumping and building the parachute on the way down. But on the other end, you could just be sitting in the plane forever. Like, hey, let's open the truck door when it's in park and let's go in. And I turn around and
you locked your mom in the car.
She gets fired up. Like, hey, why'd you lock me in? I'm like, it's been 5 minutes. I don't know what you're doing in there anymore. Just thinking about moving. I just want to move.
Well, lately you've been like testing us because you'll sit in the car an extra 30 seconds just to see if we're all out before you. Oh, it's good times.
But these things do carry over. There is kind of this mental component, but there's this physical component too of actually moving through space. It has been studied by your vision, seeing things past your eyes is a way to build momentum. If you're sit there and stuck when you're writing something, or if you're stuck on a podcast or an episode, you go out and have actual forward momentum. Your brain interprets it as forward momentum because it is. You spatially see things passing by you. And you go back and all of a sudden you can write and do more. It's not necessarily just because you're outside. It's because you move forward through space. And that is similar momentum to moving a pen down a page. It's your body interprets these things very similarly. So you should leverage that. Use your physical body. Start building momentum on this stuff.
Sounds good. I think we've covered our bases.
Okay, let me hit the summary then for us. First part of the summary is if you found this valuable, share it. We need you spreading the word, and I appreciate it for you. We're pouring our passion into it and a lot of our money, honestly, to get this up and running, to share it with you. So please share it with someone else as well. Here is the framework. Number 1 should already be done. Unless you're dropping in on this episode, then go back to episode 1 and take some time to do the core values, which is know yourself and what you stand for. That is the number 1 way to fix worry, is to be rooted in core values that you find important. I'm not going to tell you what you should believe. You choose. I don't care. Just choose something. Be a principled person in your own way. So here's the real first step after that is done. Identify the problem. Make sure you're solving the correct thing. Make a decision. Execute on that decision over time. If I were to throw a sub bullet on that one is after that time, 30, 60, 90 days, like I mentioned, pop your head up, look around, see if you've made progress. If not, change your direction slightly. There is no real right or wrong with most of these things. It's just different versions of right, and momentum cures worry and stress. So you need to get moving on a few of these things to show progress.
Yeah, and share with us if you feel like this is useful to you, because we love hearing back, and then we can keep doing it for you.
Yeah, as we've been building momentum, in the first month, we're over 5,000 views now, which has been humbling and amazing, putting us well into the top 100 parenting podcasts in just a short period of time. And so we want to thank you for that. We want to thank you for that momentum. And we've started to pick up more comments and more emails have been going back and forth. You can visit us at strongfamilyproject.com, download the free steps of the path, or you can watch the first 7 episodes, and you can watch the first 7 episodes where we explain each step of creating a strong family. All done free for you. We've been getting more interactions, couple through Facebook, even some through LinkedIn, some on Instagram, which has been picking up over at official Strong Family Co. We're active in all those places. So reach out. Tell us your stories a little bit. Tell us what has helped. Give us some questions to answer on a podcast. We'd be happy to help you. Done. Thank you for watching another episode of the Strong Family Project podcast. And Mel, thank you very much for sharing more about you and your background.
Oh, you're very welcome.